This is the video that I know so many of you have been waiting for this year. And with only 3 weddings left for 2022, I felt like I could now hop in and finally give you this video of all the chaos and all the crazy and all the things that happened in 2022 that was just bonkers. Hello lovely couples and welcome back to my channel. I'm Lauren, wedding planner and owner of Bluebird Creative. I provide a weekly dose of wedding planning goodness for the modern couple. So if you haven't already guys, make sure you subscribe to my channel and don't forget to follow me over on Instagram and TikTok at Bluebird_creative, where I provide a lot of reels that showcase our real weddings, lots more tips and tricks and a lot of behind the scenes of me just running my business. The raw, the random, and just the real. So come and join me over there. Right guys, this week's video, let's dive in. I am giving you the stories, the gossip, the crazy things that happened at our clients' weddings this year that they do not know about. They do not know these things. So I mustn't say whose weddings they were. They might watch these videos, they may suss it out, who knows, but you get to see behind the scenes a little bit of kind of what we have to deal with and some of the downright crazy things that have just happened. And I'm thinking, why? Why did this happen? Some of this is funny, some of this is very stressful, and some of it shows you just the crap that we have to deal with on occasion, or the things that we're managing that our clients don't know anything about. So let's dive in to the horror stories of 2022. This one is fun. Okay guys, so I have my list of all the crazy that happened at a variety of different weddings this year. I'm not going to say where the weddings were or what the weddings were. I'm just going to tell you all the mental things. Some of them are not that crazy and some of them are downright bonkers with the amount of things that was going on, and I don't know how we got out the other side. So let's start off with something that, okay, this isn't crazy at all, but these are just things that happened and you think, why is that a situation? One of our weddings, we had to cut the stationery on the morning. So we were unpacking the stationery for the couple and we were putting them into lovely gold frames, and unfortunately the sizing was wrong. So we were actually having to hand cut with scissors and a ruler each sign for each table, and the cake table and the card table, so it would fit in the frames. Needless to say, I now have a mini guillotine in my kit bag so that we don't have to spend quite so long if that ever happens again. Usually these are one-offs, but you know, it's better to be safe than sorry, or just wasting time trimming paper. So that happened. That same wedding, somebody ran up to me in the middle of the meal to tell me that their nan was choking. I mean, I literally nearly had a heart attack and then ran to go get a medic. And by the time we got over there, they were like, oh no, she's fine. Honestly, heart palpitations galore. You just go into like, okay, right. Oh, this wedding was bonkers. Like all these random little things that happened, or all these random things happened, and it was crazy. However, that evening we had an incident which was not enjoyable at all, and I have never experienced anything like it. And basically, it's one of our favourite venues, and they have a couple of rooms on site available for guests and the bridal party, and they don't provide cots, which is standard. Now, we are not involved in the venue, we're not involved in accommodation, and when we're doing a coordination, we don't get involved in that side of things at all. We will go up to the bride and groom's room to get things that they need, or to place stuff in there, or to put some cake in there at the end of the day. But in terms of like booking, checking in, that is not our domain, that is not our remit. That's to do with the venue, completely to do with the venue. It's not to do with the running of the actual wedding. And at the end of the evening, the nannies that were hired on site to look after the bride and groom's little one, they were putting her to bed and nobody could find the cot. And there was a conversation being had, which I overheard, and asked if I could help at all because I wasn't sure what was going on, and I could see that there was the father of the groom involved and he was getting very angry towards this member of the nannying team. So obviously if we can help solve the problem, then we will do. At which point he turned on myself and my team member and told us that it was our fault, that there was no cot provided by the venue, to which we explained we were not part of the venue, but we could find someone that they could talk to about it. That he asked what we were, what we did and who we were. We explained that we were the wedding planning team, to which he replied, it was our fault, it was our situation and we had to deal with it. I mean, he got really, really nasty. I have never experienced anything like it. And I'm not one to try and pass the blame and say, no, this isn't our problem, which it was not at all. But at the same time, I also didn't appreciate being spoken to like that. It was a really tricky situation, and you could also tell that there was no telling this guy. He was not going to listen. He was just going to shout at us. So when I said that I would speak to the bride and groom and see what they had organised for their child, he told me that I was not allowed to speak to the couple and ruin their wedding day over this. So it was a really tricky situation, and I ended up just kind of saying to him, okay, leave it with me, and we walked away because we knew that there was no winning and we just needed to get away from the situation, to which we then took ourselves away for 5 minutes just to have a discussion between us and the person from the venue and try and solve the problem and also calm down, because at which point me and my team member were feeling very emotional because we'd just been verbally attacked and it was really, really nasty. And then the bride appeared because she was popping out to her car with her mum. And she appeared and she was like, oh guys, I'm just going out to get the cot out of the car. Yeah, they were aware of the situation and they had the cot. And I wasn't allowed to ask her, even though she's my client. And obviously that would have been the next step, is to go ask her anyway because she's my client. The problem was solved. It was honestly the most ridiculous situation. And these things can happen when people are fueled by alcohol, or not even fueled by alcohol, and just, I don't know. It wasn't a pleasant situation. The man did find out that he was in the wrong and he did apologise to me, but it still was extremely uncomfortable. And I hope that I won't have to be in one of those situations again, but hopefully we dealt with it in the right way. But it's one of these things where you're constantly learning. So that was definitely a biggie this year. I'm not entirely sure what lessons we've learnt from that one, but that was definitely one that I'm not going to forget, and I don't think my team member will forget that one either. Let me take you to another wedding day. This one is right up there, top 2 crazy weddings of 2022, and it starts with a bang, guys. So just before the ceremony's about to start, the bride hasn't arrived yet, and we're sort of getting really twitchy with when the pizza company are going to turn up. Now, the pizza company were doing the mains for the wedding breakfast, which I have to say, guys, I wouldn't overly recommend because it can create really slow service. It's better for evening food, but there are options around that. Anyway, we were getting a little bit twitchy because they needed to arrive and get set up. They were doing the canapes for the drinks reception as well, and they needed to put their pop-up gazebo up and so on, and they needed to drive past the outside ceremony spot and get this all set up before the ceremony, because obviously during the ceremony they needed to be quiet. They weren't arriving. We couldn't get hold of them. We were starting to get really worried about what was going on. Do we need to come up with a plan B? We finally got hold of them, and it turns out that their pizza van's brakes had gone up in fire, in flames, and were on fire, sorry. So literally they were having an absolute nightmare. I didn't want to be like, so what time do you think you'll be here? Because they're obviously going through a lot of stress, but they were trying to manage the situation as best as possible. And we managed to come up with a plan where one of the bar companies, so in this particular wedding, they had the pizza company come in, and then they had a waiting sort of company come in to serve drinks and serve food from this pizza company. So somebody from the waiting team got in their car to go and get some of the stuff from the van while they were waiting for a new van to come, so at least we could start the process of setup. On the way to go meet the van, literally leaving the venue, the woman in the car from the waiting team crashed her car into a ditch. You cannot write this stuff, guys. You cannot write this stuff. So not only do we not have a pizza company, we've just lost a member of staff to like a bit of trauma, and she's in a ditch. Her car's stuck there. Luckily, she was fine. She was absolutely okay, and everybody in this story was absolutely safe and fine. But I mean, it was an added element of stress. Bless her, we had to make sure that she was okay, sit her down, like let her calm down. Eventually the pizza company turned up, had to ask them to be quiet during the ceremony. The bride was slightly late anyway because the hair and makeup had overrun. It was bonkers. And then during the evening reception, the signal for card payments completely went out. And so the waiting staff, the bar manager, was having to stand like halfway down the path. This was on a farm, by the way, guys, just to get signal. It was bonkers. It was absolutely bonkers. Like, and all of the staff on the day, all the suppliers were really feeling it. However, to this day, I still don't think the couple know the amount of stuff that we had to deal with. And we did end up running late on the day, maybe by an hour, which I think is blooming amazing considering all the things that happened. And I feel like there was other stuff that happened, but it's almost like I can't remember it. But it was constant. Like, everybody on the day was going, what is going on today? There's some weird energy going on, and all these things keep happening and are being thrown at us. It was absolutely crazy. But to this day, they don't know, so I don't share these sorts of things with them. We just manage them as best we can. It was nuts. Another wedding that we did was a lovely wedding. It was super, super fun, and all the suppliers were pretty great, except for the venue itself. This was like our most stepped wedding. So when I say stepped, I wear my Fitbit. I always wear my Fitbit, and we did 30,000 steps on this particular wedding day. And I think part of that is because the wedding was over in one bit outside, and then you walked kind of over a field to like the marquee for the wedding reception. Now in the evening, we came back and all the chairs were still out on the field. Now there was somebody from the venue, a caretaker, who was literally sat in a deck chair all day, and we were under the impression that he was helping us with stuff to do with the venue and like maybe would have helped with the chairs. We came back, it was getting dark because it was, I want to say it was April, so it was still sort of, you know, the days were shorter. And we started putting the chairs away, which was walking across a field and putting them away in a cupboard because they were hired in, and I'm not okay with just leaving chairs outside to be under the, like, I don't know, they could have been rained on or frost or whatever. Like, I don't want them, somebody else's kit and equipment to be ruined because we've been lazy and left it outside. Like, no, we don't have to put it in, but that's just wrong. So we put all of these chairs in this kind of like storage room place on site because I didn't want to see them get ruined. And the caretaker walked into the gardens, stood there with his hands in his pockets, watched us and walked off again whilst we were both struggling trying to do like these chairs past the point at which we were supposed to leave, but we were like, we can't leave it. It was actually bonkers, guys. But anyway, the couple were amazing and their wedding day was amazing and they were super, super happy. But it was very bizarre having a man just standing there watching you with his hands in his pockets, not doing anything while you're doing a lot of hard work and not helping, because I would never do that. So anyway, let's move on. This one's crazy. This is the #1 crazy wedding of the year, and I love this couple, and we have talked about this and they are aware of this because we've had to talk about this. So this was our biggest wedding of the year. In fact, it was our biggest wedding ever. There was 300 guests and then 400 in the evening. It was huge. It was a church wedding and then a marquee at home wedding. Absolutely huge. Possibly one of the loveliest couples to date. They had a catering company that they were actually given because their original catering company went under during COVID. So they got given this other company. I cannot help but feel like they have not catered for that many people before. I have never encountered such terrible service for a wedding breakfast in my entire career. It was crazy. 300 guests is a lot of people. I appreciate that. But serving raw lamb is not okay. Running out of potatoes with 7 tables left to serve and not telling anyone is not okay. I'm having guests grabbing me whilst I'm walking past saying, are we supposed to have potatoes with this? Because I think we're supposed to have potatoes with this. Looking at the menu and going, I think you are supposed to have potatoes with this. Why are there random roasted peppers on there that looked terrible? Go into the kitchen to find out that they'd burnt a load of potatoes and didn't have any spare. And we're just putting on a little bit of like roasted peppers instead with just a raw lamb shank. I say raw, the inside was really raw. There were a lot of people, it turns out, that weren't even eating it. It was absolutely horrendous. Not to mention the fact that they weren't topping up water, that they weren't making sure that people had a drink and wine. When they went to clear the tables, they were doing it so randomly, it was ridiculous. Apparently some people didn't even get served because there was no process to the whole thing. Some of the food was cold. And then when they were clearing the plates, and this is a big no-no, guys, they were taking the plates and scraping food onto the other plates and taking it away. You do not do that at the table. That etiquette is just not okay at a wedding. You don't start scraping food. It was so bad. The bar company were terrible. They didn't get on site early enough to get the wine chilled. They didn't have enough water. I had to send a member of my team to the supermarket to go and buy a load of bottled water to bring back on site because guests needed water. Because, I mean, you need water, and I don't even need to explain it. It was honestly crazy. Then there were certain requirements with the cake, which they completely ignored. And it seems like some of the layers of the cake disappeared. I mean, there were about 6 layers, and the bride had specifically requested that half of like these particular tiers were kept, which I had on my notes, which I'd sent to the caterers, and I went in to ask about, and they'd already done something to it. It was honestly crazy. And then when I went in and said, can we have some food for the suppliers, please? It's now 7 p.m. and everybody's really hungry, and we've obviously got to crack on like straight from the speeches. And they turned around and said to me, we put it out at 2:30. Now, they had put out, there was some random pasta dish, a tray, a small tray, like an oven dish, single one, on a table in the green room that was there when we all arrived on site. So we assumed that that was nothing to do with us. And it's also in the schedule to serve at 7 p.m. because none of the suppliers are really on site at 2:30 p.m. and everybody needs dinner. People are at the ceremony at 2:30 p.m. The band hadn't arrived on site. Not to mention, even if they had put that out, it wouldn't have been enough because there were 14 suppliers to feed. Honestly, it was ridiculous. And at which point I may have lost my cool a little bit because it wasn't okay. But we managed to keep smiling. We managed to manage the situation as much as possible. The client was well aware of what was going on, and we came out okay. And we've had discussions with the client who are very happy with how we dealt with the situation, but obviously they're really upset with how the caterers were and just the situation in general. But, you know, we've talked through it, and they kind of, you know, that was one part of the day, and the rest of the day was amazing. But it was bonkers, and I have to say my stress levels were on another level. We were serving drinks in the end. We were pouring water, we were putting wine on the tables because nobody else was doing it, and that is going above and beyond. But I wanted to try and pull it back as best as possible for this couple because it just was not okay. It was not okay. So we had another marquee wedding, and honestly, the marquee weddings are where things really can go wrong if you don't book the right suppliers. And this is also where I say you need a wedding coordinator minimum if you are having a marquee wedding, because a lot of the things the couples won't know are happening because you're dealing with it in like as you go. But things do happen, particularly in marquee weddings. So another marquee wedding that we did this year, we were on site the day before, which was fine. We were doing setup, we were prepping stuff, and then we came on the day as well. And I ended up getting an extra team member in on the day because I realised that there was probably more to be done, and I just had a feeling that we were going to need an extra body for half the day. Now, the cable company that had done the power, I would say, were perhaps a little bit cowboy, and they had put some non-waterproof cabling, power cables, to the outside ceremony location. So when we had a 15-minute mental downpour of rain, it blew one of the fuses. Now, we did have a technician on site on the day that wasn't part of the cable company's company. It was to do with the sound and lighting company. He did his best to make things work, but unfortunately it meant that half the lighting in the marquee, which was a specifically designed, aesthetically pleasing, gorgeous lighting display, half of it wasn't on for the whole day. It had these beautiful seagrass lanterns all the way across the main beam, and only one side was working, which was just not okay. And I spoke to the lighting company on the day and was like, we need somebody to come out, but it would have been a 3-hour turnaround. We tried to manage things as best we could, and in the end it was one of those things where we did have to say to the couple when they noticed it, we have tried all our options and it's not going to be doable for today, which was really sad. Like, it's not okay. But the other things that happened on this one were again down to catering, which is just not good enough. Now, when we work with a client, we send all the suppliers our timeline and we send that to the caterer, and in our timeline has all the timings. It also has all the checklists of things that need to be done in setup, usually to do with us, but it just sort of has everything in one document. Now, this particular client was very specific with her design and her aesthetic. She had designed it meticulously, so everything needed to be just so. She had ordered in champagne coupes for the drinks reception. She didn't want toasts during the meals. She wanted a red and a white wine glass on the tables. All absolutely fine. The caterer turned up, the front of house manager, and didn't have a clue. They turned up at 11 o'clock the day of the wedding, which to me just does not make sense. They weren't there prepping the kitchen the day beforehand. It was crazy. She didn't know that there were drinks pre-ceremony. Bearing in mind, she had my timeline and it was all on there, and it says everything that's being served, how the tables are being set up, and so on. She didn't know that it was a pre-ceremony drink station. She only thought that there was bubbles for the drinks reception after the ceremony, not realising that there was supposed to be fizzy elderflower and fresh mint, which the couple had bought and was all in the kitchen, not knowing that there were supposed to be beers and so on. Again, luckily we have it all in our documentation, but not okay. She didn't know that they wanted a red and a white wine glass on the table. She was planning on putting a Prosecco flute down on the table. They weren't having toasts. It was honestly bonkers, and I wouldn't usually have to go and double check that the caterer knows all this information, because we would have had these conversations. They have seen our timeline. It was honestly insane. My mind was blown. And then when it came to the actual meal itself, unfortunately, the service was extremely slow. And when the mother of the bride was saying that there's not enough grazing boards on the table, she was coming to us. To which I said, let me check with the kitchen and the front of house manager, and she can, you know, explain the situation to you. When the woman wouldn't come out of the kitchen and was telling me that there were enough and that they had to hand them around. But I had a waiting staff looking at me going, I don't think there's enough boards on the table. So obviously it would have made sense for the front of house manager to actually come out instead of hiding in the kitchen. And front of house manager, but I think unfortunately she was playing both roles, front of house and back of house manager, and to come out and actually see if there was enough. And again, it's the mother of the bride. It's a really key person in the wedding party. It was really, really awkward. The bride and groom ended up getting up at one point because they were like, the service is really slow. To which point I had to go into the kitchen and say, guys, the couple have now stood up. They're coming to me. They're really concerned that the service is slow. What can we do to speed this up? How can we help? We've really got to pick this up. But instead of being received in a, you're trying to help us and we're trying to make this right for the couple, it was seen as a, I wasn't a very nice person. So that when we were handed our supplier meals eventually, I got told, here's your food, not that I want to give it to you right now. Honestly, guys, it's not okay. And then right at the end of the evening, at 8 o'clock, the caterers just brought out the evening food. And we were like, it's not supposed to come out till 9. And then the groom saw it and said, take that back to the kitchen. It's not supposed to come out till 9 o'clock. And the catering manager looked at me and I was like, it's all in the timeline. I don't even know how that's happened. It was nutty. I have to say, at the end of that wedding, I felt pretty exhausted. It was not okay. It was not okay. We have only had a few weddings like that this year. There were three that were very bonkers. That's one of the top three. Finally, two little crazies to add to this list of crazy. This is a very long video, guys. One of the weddings, a guest's hair caught on fire because she was stood back watching their first dance, and the bar of the venue, which is actually a hotel, had a candle on it, and I could smell burning, and I literally, during the first dance, was then off trying to work out where the burning was coming from, and it turns out it was a guest's hair. She was absolutely fine and her hair was okay, luckily. I think somebody had caught it early enough. I went to report it to the venue to let them know that the situation had happened, and obviously for future reference, like, they shouldn't have candles up on the bar, and just to kind of like let them know of the situation. To which point they said, well, is she hurt? And I was like, no, she's not hurt, but I felt like you needed to know what's happened. They didn't care, which isn't right. And finally, unfortunately, this is another venue situation. We had a wedding very recently where it was in London. It was amazing. And we were on a boat for the drinks reception, arriving at the venue. So they'd gone from one part of London to another part of London, and the drinks reception was on a boat, which was so cool. And we got off the boat. Now, one of the guests was in a wheelchair, so she made it off the boat, and then there's a lift to get up, to get onto the dock or the walkway to get off onto the venue. And the lift wasn't on. And the attendant on the dock was like, oh no, the lift's not on. Well, we've got a guest in a wheelchair. And the venue manager said, well, we weren't aware that there's a guest in a wheelchair. Basically, the long and short of it is, it took 45 minutes for them to get the lift working because they had turned it off. Now, it seems that they would only turn the lift on if they were aware that there was a disabled person that needed the lift. Now, in my opinion, and in my team's opinion, if you have a boat coming in with guests coming off, you should have that lift working, because not everybody's disability is something that they want to announce. Not everybody's disability is a wheelchair, and you shouldn't be asking for that in advance. There are elderly people that needed to use that lift and instead had to make their way up the stairs. There's parents with prams who should be able to use that lift. And obviously there was this poor woman in this wheelchair that was made to wait for 45 minutes. Now, we went and made sure that she had her own platter of canapes. They told us we couldn't bring alcohol onto the dock, so we managed to bring her a soft drink and keep her calm. It was a really horrible situation because we felt completely out of control, because they were then having a technical issue and couldn't turn it on. And just before we got it started working, and we got it working, thank the Lord, but just beforehand, I got told by the venue manager that the plan B was to put her back on a boat, to drop her off somewhere else, and then she would get a taxi round to the venue, which I had to pay for because this was my problem. Bonkers, guys. Absolutely bonkers. So there you have it. We had some crazy things happen this year. Now, this video is not meant to be negative, because we've laughed at these things, we've managed these things, we've dealt with these things, we've come out stronger, better, maybe a little bit battered and emotional, but it's all been fun and it's all part of the job. And we are firefighting. When you're a coordinator, you are often firefighting. When you plan the wedding, the day itself is always smoother because you've planned it from start to finish. You've had communication with the suppliers from start to finish, and you've double checked every single detail throughout the process. When you coordinate, you step in 4 weeks beforehand, you gather all the information, you send out all the information, and you hope that everybody's read it, and then you do firefight. But I highly recommend having coordinators, particularly for marquee weddings, because the amount of stuff that can happen is crazy, and we do manage it. We do also take the brunt of a lot of stuff as well, but it's okay. We're tough girls and we're used to it. Anyway, guys, I hope you found this video fun. It honestly, it has been an incredible 2022. I wouldn't change it for the world. We've got 3 more weddings to come, which I'm super excited about, and 2023 is looking amazing. So anyway, I hope this made you have a chuckle at the craziness that we've been through, and I will be back next week for some more wedding planning goodness.